which means it's been out now for about 3.5, 4 weeks so far. The airplay it's had has been mainly provincial. There hasn't been a lot on the national stations. We've been played on one national show, which is on Saturday afternoons at 2 o'clock and reaches millions upon millions of Britishers. And there's been some good feedback to that one play, and there's also been some play on a couple of other shows that have been quite important. Reaction so far in that media has been somewhat scanty because the utilisation of that particular media has not been all that large to date. But reaction so far in terms of press and just general knowledge of us throughout the business has been very good. We have had reviews in all the major papers now. They've been overwhelmingly favourable, although some of them have, of course, been a little perhaps more clever than complimentary. But that's the English press for you. The general public have yet to see us, so reaction so far has been limited to newspapers, radio, and television has been very promising so far. We were even offered a slot on a show which is aimed largely at 8 to 14-year-olds, so for all our true fans in Australia, that will of course be a departure from the norm as far as Split Enz has been to date. It was quite a stroke of luck, actually. We've now started working with a woman called Lynn Franks, who is a freelance fashion publicist, and of course she has a lot of very good and strong contacts with the fashion world generally, and it's an area that not many groups get a foot in the door of. And she's working with us now in a part-time capacity, but before we actually put her on the books, she did a little bit of work for us initially, and she got us on a show called Today, which is a current affairs program on ITV every night at about 6 o'clock, and 14 million people watch it, and she got us on that in terms of an interview and just general Split Enz on the box visuals, and consequently we've had a lot of recognition in the street, and just the name generally now is getting around quite a lot. So I mean, we've always known that TV is good for us, and that's an indication yet again that it can work wonders. And we're hoping to get on a couple of shows coming up soon. There's one called the Old Grey Whistle Test, which starts again shortly, and we're fairly sure of getting on that. I think TV is going to be very important for us. Well, first of all, I suppose it's fair to say that it was a complete success. I mean, it didn't exactly tip the balance in any way, because it was a contrived situation, invitation only, purely for press and media people generally, business people generally, so it wasn't like a real live performance in that sense. But it was very important in terms of them seeing us, them being the cynical, cold side of the business. And there was a huge attendance. A lot of people came through invitations, and a lot of people came through interest, I suppose. I don't know how they managed to get in, but there was a big crowd there. And we got an encore, which I think is pretty unusual in that sort of situation where they come along to view you. It's like a test rather than a performance, and I think we passed the test, but we of course didn't expect any direct feedback from it in terms of articles or stories or anything, because as I say, it was a contrived situation, and they're going to wait until they see us in front of the punters before they put their opinions down in black and white. But the feedback from that was very good. We got a lot of European people over from chrysalis licensees in Europe, and there was some Japanese people there, some Canadian people there, and Dutch, Belgium, I think Holland, France. There was a bloke there from France called Freddie Hauser, who is a producer of a show called Jukebox, which is a nationwide program that goes out in France, and I think it hits parts of Germany and Holland as well. I'm not sure, but it's a very highly rated show, both aesthetically and in terms of journalistic coverage. And they want to do a section of one of their shows on us in later this month, which is a big breakthrough in France. And Holland is going to use a video film of us on a show there called Filter Futura, I think it is. It doesn't really matter, but it's an important show in Holland. So generally in Europe things look very promising. This was all really a direct result of the marquee and advanced publicity they've received, photos, etc. Chrysalis have done a very good job in terms of presenting the band through photos and videos, and generally they've paved the way for us in many areas. Japan is an interesting market. It's a huge market, and so far interest there has been very encouraging. Yes, well, the following day actually, we went into a hotel in the middle of town and talked with reporters from Belgium, from Japan, from Italy, from France, and I think from Holland, and they were all very impressed with the performance they had seen the night before at the Marquee. It was good that they saw us so soon afterwards because their enthusiasm was still there. Did some very good interviews and they took some photos and just generally encouraged us and told us that things in Europe looked good and they couldn't wait to see us perform over there in front of their own audiences. So it was a very good event, but in terms of leaping ahead in the general public's eye, of course it achieved very little. It was just purely a thing that gave us a lot of encouragement and got our name known to a lot of the media and business people. There was speculation we were going to do a gig with Jethro Tull, Gentle Giant, and Todd Rundgren at Crystal Palace. The reason we're not doing that is because Jethro Tull have decided to do no more dates this year in England, so of course that particular gig became unavailable. But the good news is that we are starting a tour which is going to take us through to the 1st of November, which means we'll be on the road for something like 5-6 weeks, which is good because we have got itchy feet. We're going to do the tour with a band called Jack the Lad, who I'm sure a lot of people won't have heard of, but they're a splinter group from the old Lindisfarne, and in many ways it'll be a reasonably low-key tour, although it'll be a very good way for us to start our career here in England, because there's a good chance that we'll come off well in that sort of situation. We've been given a fair amount of freedom with PA facilities and lighting facilities, and with a bit of luck we'll be able to put on a show that's our own. And after that we're going to spend a week in, I think, Holland and possibly Germany doing a couple of prestigious sort of club dates, similar to the Marquee one, and that there'll be press there, but there'll also be general public as well. And we're going to appear on TV in Europe. And then I think there's a possibility we'll be doing our own tour, depending on the interest we create through the Jack the Lad tour, which hopefully will be considerable. And we've got every reason to believe that it could be, because we've had a lot of good feedback from the provincial newspapers and provincial media people generally. Most of our radio plays have been, as I said, out of London, around the southern area, parts of England, and some up north as well. And we've had good reviews in quite a number of dailies. So I think we can look forward to hitting the provinces on our own tour it'll be later in November. And then we hope to return to Australia and New Zealand early December. The tour with Jack the Lad it covers 25 cities. There's one in Wales, a couple in Scotland, most of them are in England. And I presume they'll be playing halls of 2,000, perhaps 3,000 capacity, I'm not sure. So it's not like doing a Queen support or a Bowie support or a Roxy Music support, thank God, because we really do want to start slowly and steadily and surely and build our momentum, much in the same way as we did in Australia, because it worked so well for us in Australia that way, and we're hoping to achieve the same results here. There's been a very big backlash at the moment against hyped bands and performers generally, against sudden appearances on the scene, because they're almost inevitably followed by sudden disappearances. And we think that the fact that we're a New Zealand band here in England with a perhaps 4-year guaranteed future in terms of contract, but perhaps longer still in terms of ambition, and for us to survive here and be a solid working band, touring, doing TV, doing radio, doing concerts, recording albums, that to us is a real successful start. Yes, well, we think that the spectacular content is there in the performance itself, and doesn't necessarily need to be surrounded by spectacularly sized halls and spectacularly sized audiences and spectacularly sized PAs and spectacularly sized lights. Yes, well, I mean, there is certainly a trend that's perhaps dying a little, I don't know, for huge concerts, and also in England anyway, there's very little opportunity for big bands to do anything else, because there's so many people want to see them, and it would mean spending 2 weeks in each city if they wanted to do small theatres. But I know that Split Enz have no ambition whatsoever to end up playing stadiums, you know, given that we were ever in a situation to do so. I think the most people at one time that we would like to play to is perhaps 4,000 to 5,000. Through acquaintances of people at Chrysalis and acquaintances we've struck up ourselves since we've been here, we find that people find it at first listening confusing. At second listening, they start to analyse it a little bit more and appreciate it piece by piece, and by third, fourth, fifth, whatever listening, they start seeing the thing as a whole and it makes sense to them. And so far we've had very good reactions from people who tend to stick to the great established acts such as Paul McCartney and Paul Simon. People like that who buy all the albums that everybody buys have reacted to our album very well. It's not, at the moment, indicative of a cult band situation, which we're very pleased about. We want to get across to as many people as possible, as I have said many times before. Besides media people and business people generally, which sector of the world's population made up the majority of the audience at the Marquee, there were also invited friends of Phil Manzanera's, and we were lucky to have in the audience, we had in the audience friends of Phil's, the guys from 10cc, Eno, a couple of other so-called stars, and the fact, I suppose, that they appreciate what we're doing and enjoy it can only be good in terms of morale boosting for us and credibility giving generally. Perhaps I should retract the cold. I mean, I only said that because it's a colourful phrase, and there were really quite a few people there, quite warm indeed. Phil Manzanera has a lot of friends in the fashion world, and Lynn Franks, who I mentioned earlier, who is now involved in our publicity machine, has a lot of contacts in the fashion world, and we seem to have captured their imagination to quite a large extent. I mean, London is definitely a centre of fashion for the world, and Noel is becoming not only an adept seamstress, but a master of the media at large generally, and he has now established quite a few interesting contacts with people. There was a girl there from the Evening News newspaper who fell in love with the whole Noel-ness of the costumes and used an article about Noel the following night, accompanied by a photograph of Mr. Crombie, our suave and disciplined hero, to the spoon-fed masses. And generally fashion people throughout London have reacted well. The Thames TV show called Today, which I mentioned earlier, was largely a result of contacts through the fashion world that Lynn has. They have never used a rock band on one of their Today shows before, but they wanted to use the video they had seen of us so much that they included us on this show, which is a current affairs show, as I said, but also the emphasis lately has been on fashion, and they used us in full costume and asked us about the band generally, but I don't think we would have got that particular slot if it hadn't been for our contacts in the fashion world, so there you are. The audience reaction at the Marquee seemed very good to us at the time whilst we were playing, and immediately afterwards this view seemed to have been shared by many of the media people who were there. In fact, Alan Jones from Melody Maker, who's an important writer for that paper, and Angus McKinnon from New Musical Express, both said that it was the best reaction they had seen at a press reception so far for quite a few years. We got an encore which they said was unusual. Well, life for a musician in England, London perhaps particularly, is not easy. I think in many ways Australia and perhaps New Zealand is far healthier in terms of the bands on the lower rungs of the ladder. Bands here are divided into two camps. There's those on the bottom and those at the top, and there's very little in between ground, and to get to the top from the bottom you need an enormous amount of money, patience, time, effort, blah blah. We've arrived somewhere in that middle area because of our unique position with strong backing that bands over here would find it very hard to assemble. For an hour spot a night, bands here in hotels often get paid somewhere between 30 and £50. £50 is good money, because of course in Australia we were earning for an hour spot $300 to $400 generally. In fact, in Perth we received $600. That was just before we left for England. The costs are, if anything, greater and harder to meet, of course, because, I mean, it costs bands money to do gigs over here, and the price of gear is ludicrous. Fender Rhodes electric piano, which costs over $1,000 in Australia and New Zealand, costs $3,400 here, or £1,700. I mean, that's just one example. Gear over here is expensive. Venues are very poor in terms of stage size and general dressing room facilities. But this is, I say, on the lower rungs. I mean, hopefully Split Enz won't be involved in gigs of that sort. We're hoping to get straight into a concert situation. But if we did have to do that sort of work, it would be very hard for us. I don't think a band should come here until they have fairly strong backing. Well, it's very polarised. Singles receiving much greater media attention than albums. There's a TV show called Top of the Pops, which reaches about 10 million people. They feature exclusively singles, and in fact singles in the top 30 of the charts, so it's a very healthy scene. Yes, that's right. There's other shows you can buy your way onto. There's about three, at any one time, no more than three shows on TV each week that feature rock music. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people in England that buy records. There's a huge rock audience here. It's an incredible place in terms of the music they've produced over the years. Some magnificent music, and so I'm just amazed that the general economic structuring of the biz over here seems to be so one-sided. And is that if a band here makes it, they really have to believe and work at it. But I mean, I would hate to paint a gloomy picture, because as I say, they have produced such great music, and their studio facilities are so good, and their engineers are so good. There's a lot of very creative people involved, but it ain't easy for the boys down the bottom. The Antipodean invasion, I don't know, I don't see it as a movement. I see it as a very scattered, fragmented thing, but nevertheless a penetration. It's been a long time now. The eyes of the world, well, the world, the West, say United States English markets, the eyes of those markets have turned to the third world situation, the Jamaican musicians, and a movement has been called a movement. It seems to be starting there in terms of reggae music, and I'm sure that they're looking elsewhere now as well. I mean, it's time really for things to come in from the outside. They need the stimulus of people who haven't been subjected to the cynics found here and not found out in the nice fresh Antipodes, which isn't the greatest place for a band to survive, but it's a good place to be when you're starting out and forming your ideas. Australian bands, it has to be, because I think there's one other New Zealand band here that we know of. It used to be called the Calculated Risk, and they're now called Biggles, I think. And I think they're starting to record something fairly soon. That's the only New Zealand band that we know of over here. But there's Australian bands such as AC/DC who are doing extremely well. They're breaking club records, the attendance records at the Marquee Club in town. And they've got a very strong following here in London. I think nationally they're starting to happen too. Yes, they have. They did the Reading Festival a couple of weeks ago, which is a festival held in front of 35,000 people, which is an important performance for them. I'm not too sure of what else they've done. They pop up in the media, and from time to time they've made a good start. Sherbet singles being thrashed on the radio over here, they look like doing very well. Little River Band have had reviews lately, and ads have been appearing.